Xiaomi invests in Huami and Huami invests in Amazfit. So basically, this is the Xiaomi Amazfit Verge Smartwatch, and that is a pretty long name for a smartwatch. The Verge is the third smartwatch in their lineup ever since they launched back in 2016. The third also has the most radical changes ever since they existed, and it left me with quite some mixed feelings, so let's dive right into it. Right off the bat, I have to say, I don't think that this is the most beautiful designed smartwatch that Amazfit has ever made. I think they're better looking smartwatches, especially from the first and second generation. And if you're curious, I made a video review on them and you can find it here in the top right corner. The Verge, however, is the most rugged and robust from all of them, and it's comfortable around the wrist. Now, that might be a little bit personal because with the thickness of 1.26 centimeters, it is relatively thick and chunky, and if you have thin wrist like me, it might not always be the most comfortable. And even though the build quality is good, it remains mostly plastic with silicone straps. It is definitely not the most premium looking and feeling smartwatch, but it definitely feels that it's made to last for a long time, and it's an interesting piece of smart tech. The Verge is the first smartwatch in their lineup with an AMOLED panel, and that is a big change because they come from a transflective display, and if you shift to an AMOLED panel, that is a huge change, one of those radical changes that I'm talking about, because with the transflective displays you can easily read it outdoors, and they got so famous because of that display and with the amazing battery life. On one hand, it is said that they shifted to an AMOLED panel, but on the other hand, and I will come back to that in a moment, it looks like that they have mastered how to save and master the battery life, and that is really impressive, but I will come back to that in a moment. The transflective displays on the Amazfit Stratos and the Amazfit Pace are an interesting piece of tech, but personally, to be honest, I prefer the AMOLED panel a whole lot more. You get more vibrant colors, you got deeper blacks, and the faster refresh rate, and those are all very noticeable on a day-to-day basis. And at this price point it is probably one of the best displays, but the lowest brightness setting at night is for me not low enough. It's too bright for users at night, and it kind of hurts your eyes and can wake somebody up. The pixel density for the display is the only thing that you might stumble upon. The resolution is, while looking at it from a normal distance, okay-ish, but as soon as you get closer or a little bit closer, you see the pixels just jumping. Therefore, it looks that the interface isn't buttery smooth, which at times isn't, to be honest. At least not as smooth as you're able to get on a Wear OS device from Google. My device was from origin a Chinese model, but with just a few quick and easy steps you can transfer it into an international model with the international ROM with still over-the-air updates. And if you're curious, I will leave a link in the video's description to an 𝙤𝙀 page where you can easily do it yourself and get this into English, because out of the box it comes only in Chinese. Just like any other kind of smartwatch and smartband, you can track all of your activities with this smartwatch as well, and Amazfit mentioned that they improved the sensors and the hardware a lot. And that is one of those things that I noticed, because the heart rate monitor is more active than ever before for more accurate readouts on a more consistent basis. For tracking activities, I've counted my steps while walking, and it looks to be pretty precise. It is only a really small margin of error, and the same counts for the heart rate. Quite often it's only 1 or 2 beats off. Sleeping with the Amazfit Verge is a completely different story, because first of all, it is not the most comfortable to sleep with, and that is mainly because of its thickness. With 1.26 centimeters, it is just not as comfortable, and you bounce basically into your partner, into the wall, etc. And I don't know how scratch resistant the screen is. The second thing is that if you wake up during the night and you check the time on the watch, then it doesn't register that you were awake, and that is something like a major problem, because it happened to me already 2 or 3 times that I woke up, I checked the time and fell asleep again, and this should be monitored as a wake up period, but the watch didn't. And that is not the only thing, it also does something similar in the mornings, because if you wake up and you stay pretty stable in bed, your heartbeat remains stable and pretty low and you don't move too much, then it still thinks that you're sleeping. And sometimes I was even playing on the watch, and then they just change the time that you wake up, and I'm just seeing the time jumping to a later period, and I'm like, I'm playing with the watch, I'm awake, and you just still tell me that I wake up later, but I'm already awake. And that is something that I think has to do with that the heart rate monitor doesn't work. If your heart rate stays the same, it is okay, but it also checks if you're moving, and if you're not moving a lot, then it just says you're still sleeping. And this is something that can be easily solved, because if Amazfit puts an update, says that if you interact with the smartwatch you're awake, the whole problem is solved. But for now, the sleeping accuracy is not the best. However, the Amazfit Verge is the best Amazfit smartwatch so far for delivering notifications from your phone to your wrist. Firstly, because they changed the OS a little bit. Notifications are delivered in a more clear format and with less text that is cut off. Second point is that because they added a microphone, it means that you can answer calls directly from the watch itself. The latter feature is the first for an Amazfit smartwatch, and you can also make calls directly from the watch itself as long as it's connected to your phone. As mentioned before, they shifted away from the reflective display to an AMOLED panel, and at first I was a little bit sad and disappointed, but the battery life is still for an Amazfit smartwatch amazing, or for smartwatches in general amazing. They advertise with roughly 5 days, and that is 100% correct, and that is with notifications turned on. Once I correctly set up the timers and the do not disturb schedules, etc., I managed to get 6 and sometimes even 7 days with the watch, because you just don't use the watch at night and it saves so much battery when you enable those kind of features. Now, if you enable, for example, the continuous heart rate monitor and GPS, you will take off a day of the 5 days. Of course, it is not as good as the Amazfit Bip, Stratos or Pace, but I still believe and think that this is very impressive what Amazfit did regarding the battery life. Of course, there are more interesting points that I want to share with you, and the first one is, for example, that you can put music directly onto your watch. The second thing is it still has a waterproofing grade of IP68, and the last point, the GPS is not as good as on your phone, let's say, but the Verge is good enough to track your activity outdoors. With the Amazfit Verge, you can connect it to the Mi Fit application or to Amazfit's own application, and the latter one is the one that I'm using. It is smooth, easy to use, it has a clean interface, and if you really want to save some battery and only use it for tracking activities, you can disconnect the watch and upload once per week the data in order to save even more battery, and that is kind of interesting if you don't want to have all the notifications running all day. As you might have guessed, this watch is not running on Google's Wear OS, even though it looks like a little bit like Wear OS. And the other thing is that you cannot sideload any kind of applications from Google's Wear OS, for example. And therefore, I really miss Google Maps, for example. You can miss Apple Health, you can miss Google Fit. And because of those reasons, you might want to consider another smartwatch if this is really important to you. In the end, I really hope that Amazfit one day will port some of its Chinese features to the English version, because right now we have the English version with over-the-air updates, but you lack therefore some of its features, for example the Mi Home app. And I think that you can control some of the smart features or smart home gadgets that we have over here at home, and it would be nice to just use the watch a little bit more. The other thing is transportation cards. In China you can use this watch in over 165 cities to just check in and use the public transport, and I think that would be really nice if they implemented this with Western standards. To conclude, the Amazfit Verge is definitely interesting if you want to track all of your activities and if you need to make a phone call every once in a while. On the other hand, if you want to have a Stratos more like a luxury and fashion statement, the Stratos is a pretty interesting smartwatch as well, but it's always up to you to decide what is more important. Do you want excellent tracking capabilities with reliable results, or are you more like the fashion guy? Both are definitely recommendable, but if you're able to grab this for $150, it is a real steal, even though it has the really small shortcomings. If you want to try out a different kind of smartwatch, for example with Google's Wear OS, I will leave a link here in the top right corner, because 𝙤𝙪𝙗𝙗, part of the Fossil group, makes really nice and beautiful designed Google Wear OS watches, if you're more into the fashion statement, of course. If you're a subscriber to the channel, you know that I always test a product for quite some time before I publish a video on the channel. I also post behind the scenes, polls, videos, photos, and a whole lot more. And if you have some questions, I'm always very active in the comment section down below. So if you haven't subscribed already, I urge you to do so. Don't forget to give the video a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and then I hope to see all of you in the next one.